The outcast. The cold emptiness of space stretched endlessly around her. Zyra sat in the cockpit of a dying ship, staring into the void. Her body ached, her throat was dry, and the blinking red lights on the control panel told her what she already knew. She wasn't going to last much longer. Her ship, a small single-passenger vessel, was barely functional. The fuel was almost gone. The oxygen levels were dropping. And worst of all, she was alone. Abandoned. Exiled. Forgotten. Her own people had cast her out. The Gathri Dominion, the mighty warrior empire, had deemed her unworthy. Zyra gritted her teeth, but the memory burned like fire. The trial of strength. The day of her exile had been the worst day of her life. She had stood before the High Council, surrounded by the towering warriors of her kind. The Gathri were strong, fierce, built for war. But Zyra? She was small, by Gathri standards, at least. She wasn't weak, but she wasn't strong enough either. And in the Dominion, strength was everything. The trial of strength was meant to prove one's worth. She had trained for it, fought with all she had, but it wasn't enough. She could still hear the words of the elder warlord, his voice like stone. You are a disgrace to our bloodline. You have no place among us. Be gone. And just like that, her fate was sealed. They didn't kill her. That would have been an honor. Instead, they had done something worse. They had left her to die alone. Nowhere left to go. Zyra exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the cracked glass of her helmet. Her fingers tightened around the controls, but the ship was barely responding. There was nowhere to go. No one to call. Her people had erased her. And now, the void would swallow her whole. She closed her eyes. Maybe this was what the Dominion wanted. Maybe this was how it was meant to end. Then, a blip on the radar. Zyra's eyes snapped open. A ship. Not Gathri. Something else. The blinking light on the scanner was moving toward her. Her heart pounded. Pirates. Slavers. Or something worse. But at this point, did it even matter? She had nothing left to lose. The human encounter. The ship was massive. Not a warship, but not a cargo hauler either. Sleek, armored, built for speed. Zyra tried to power her engines, a last attempt at control. Nothing. Her ship was dead in space. The unknown vessel drew closer. Then, a voice crackled through the communicator. Unidentified vessel, this is Commander Darren Holt of the Starbound Horizon. Do you copy? Zyra froze. A human. She had never spoken to one before, only heard stories, war stories. The Dominion saw humans as weak, fragile, too dependent on technology. But this one? His voice was calm. Confident. She hesitated, then reached for the communicator. Static. Her systems were too damaged to send a response. The human spoke again. Your ship's unresponsive. I'm bringing you in. Zyra barely had time to react before a bright light flooded her cockpit. The human's ship had locked onto her vessel. A tractor beam. She was being pulled in. Zyra's hands balled into fists. Was this a rescue? Or capture? Either way, she wasn't going down without a fight. Aboard the Starbound Horizon. The moment Zyra's ship landed inside the hangar bay, she moved. She tore off the safety straps, ignoring the burning pain in her muscles, and reached for the only weapon she had left, a small energy blade strapped to her leg. The ship's hatch opened. She lunged forward, only to slam into something solid. A hand. Strong. Unmoving. Human. Commander Darren Holt stood before her, his grip iron tight around her wrist. Whoa, easy there. Not exactly the welcome I was expecting. Zyra struggled, but he didn't let go. She looked up at him, really looking at him for the first time. He wasn't weak. Not even close. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running along his jaw, he looked like someone who had seen too many battles and survived them all. He didn't look afraid of her. And that confused her. She had spent her whole life being told she was too weak. But this human? He wasn't treating her like she was weak at all. A new choice. "Let me go," Zyra growled. Darren studied her for a moment. Then, he released her. She took a shaky step back, clutching her weapon. He didn't raise his gun. Didn't attack. Didn't treat her like an enemy. Instead, he crossed his arms and said, "You look like hell. When's the last time you ate?" Zyra blinked. That was not what she expected. She clenched her jaw. "I don't need your help." Darren tilted his head. "Sure about that?" "Because from where I'm standing, you look like you're about 5 minutes from passing out." Zyra's legs trembled. Damn him. Damn him for being right. She wanted to fight. To refuse. But the hunger, the exhaustion, it was too much. Her grip loosened on her weapon. Darren sighed, then stepped aside. "There's food in the mess hall. Medical bays down the hall if you need it." Zyra stared at him. Why was he helping her? She didn't understand. But as she took a hesitant step forward, she realized something. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't pushing her away. The human's offer. Zyra sat in the dimly lit mess hall, staring at the food on the table. Her hands hovered over the plate, a simple meal of protein cubes and nutrient paste. Human food. It smelled different. Not bad, just unfamiliar. Her stomach ached from hunger, but her mind screamed at her to stop. She had been raised in the Gathri Dominion, where only the strong survived. Where accepting help was weakness. And yet, here she was. Aboard a human ship. Rescued by a human soldier. She clenched her fists. What was she doing? Across the table, Darren Holt leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching her with calm amusement. "You gonna eat, or just glare at it?" he asked. Zyra's eyes narrowed. "I don't need your pity." Darren raised an eyebrow. "Pity? Nah. You'd be dead if I pitied you. This is just food." Zyra exhaled sharply, but the hunger won. She grabbed the protein cube and ate it in one bite. Her body immediately reacted, grateful. Darren smirked. "See? Not so bad." She swallowed. "Tastes like dirt." Darren chuckled. "You get used to it." For a moment, silence settled between them. Then, Zyra finally asked the question burning in her mind. "Why did you save me?" The human's answer. Darren's smirk faded. He studied her carefully before speaking. "You ever hear what humans do with broken things?" Zyra frowned. "What?" Darren gestured around the ship. "We fix them." She blinked. "I'm not broken." Darren shrugged. "Could have fooled me." Zyra's teeth clenched. "You think I'm weak?" Darren leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "I think you got thrown away by people who don't deserve you. That's different." Zyra inhaled sharply. She didn't have an answer to that. Because deep down, she had thought the same thing. A different kind of strength. Darren stood up and grabbed his jacket. "Come on." Zyra scowled. "Where?" He smirked. "Time for a lesson." She hesitated. "A lesson in what?" Darren tilted his head. "What it means to be strong." "The training room." Zyra followed Darren through the metal corridors of the ship until they reached a large, open space, the training room. A combat ring sat in the center, surrounded by various weapons. Darren stepped inside, rolling his shoulders. "All right. Let's see what you got." Zyra crossed her arms. "You want to fight me?" Darren smirked. "No. I want you to fight like a human." Zyra narrowed her eyes. "I was trained in combat since I could walk." "Yeah." Darren picked up a wooden practice stick. "Then prove it." He tossed one to her. Zyra caught it easily. "Fine." Darren raised his stick. "First lesson, humans don't fight fair." Zyra barely had time to react before he moved. The fight. Darren was fast. Zyra had sparred with Gathari warriors before, but Darren fought differently. He didn't rely on brute force. He moved with precision, dodging, countering, striking from unexpected angles. Zyra blocked his first hit, but not the second. Pain shot through her ribs as he landed a clean hit. She growled and swung harder. Darren ducked. Twisted. Moved like water. Then, he swept her legs out from under her. Zyra hit the ground hard. Darren stepped back, resting his stick on his shoulder. Lesson 2, being strong isn't about hitting the hardest. It's about hitting the smartest. Zyra scowled. Gathari warriors fight with honor. Darren smirked. Honor's nice. Winning is better. Zyra glared at him, but he was right. She had never fought like this before. And if she wanted to survive, she needed to learn. She stood up, gripping the practice stick tighter. "Again," she said. Darren grinned. "Now we're talking." A new path. Hours passed. Zyra fought, lost, learned, adapted. And for the first time, she didn't feel weak. She felt different. Stronger, not in the way the Gathari wanted, but in a way they would never understand. Darren tossed her a water bottle. "Not bad. You pick things up fast." Zyra caught it, drinking deeply. She hesitated, then muttered, "Thank you." Darren raised an eyebrow. "For what?" Zyra looked down at her hands. "For not treating me like I'm broken." Darren smiled. "Nah. You were never broken. Your people just didn't know what to do with you." He turned toward the exit. "But we do." Zyra blinked. "We?" Darren gestured toward the hallway. "Come on. It's time you met the crew." The crew of the Starbound Horizon. Zyra followed Darren into the main hall, where a group of misfits sat around a large table. A massive, four-armed alien was arm-wrestling a human woman with cybernetic implants. A grumpy-looking pilot was cleaning a plasma rifle. A small, energetic engineer was tinkering with a floating drone. They all turned toward Zyra. For a moment, she tensed. Then, Darren clapped a hand on her shoulder. "Everyone, this is Zyra. She's with us now." The group nodded, grinned, welcomed her without hesitation. Zyra's chest tightened. She had never belonged anywhere before. But here. Maybe things were different. Maybe this was her place. Maybe, she had a home. Learning to fight. The Starbound Horizon was unlike anything Zyra had ever seen. It wasn't a warship. It wasn't a battleship. It was something different. A place where outcasts, rebels, and the unwanted found a home. And somehow, Zyra was now one of them. She sat at the round table in the mess hall, surrounded by Darren's crew, a mix of humans and aliens, each one completely different from the next. A four-armed Brathian brawler named Torvax was eating enough food for 3 people. A quiet sniper named Sienna was sharpening a knife, her cybernetic eye glowing faintly. The ship's pilot, a grumpy human named Lauren, was complaining about fuel costs. And across from Zyra, a tiny engineer named Rilo, barely half her size, was grinning like a child. "So, you're the Guthrie outcast, huh?" Rilo chirped. Zyra stiffened. "You say that like it's funny." Rilo chuckled. "Nah. Just surprising. Guthrie usually think humans are weak." Zyra crossed her arms. "That's what they taught us." Torvax let out a deep laugh. "Then they are fools." Zyra blinked. Torvax was easily twice her size, built like a walking mountain. And yet, he spoke about humans with respect. "You see," Torvax rumbled, "humans do not fight for power. They fight for each other. That is what makes them dangerous." Zyra frowned. "That doesn't make sense. Strength is what wins wars." Darren leaned back in his chair. "Is it?" He gestured toward the crew. "You think we're the strongest in the galaxy? The biggest? The best warriors?" Zyra hesitated. "No, but..." Darren smirked. "Then why are we still alive?" Silence. Zyra had no answer. She had been taught that power decided everything. But this crew had no power. They were survivors. Fighters. And they had beaten the odds. Maybe, there was something more to strength than she realized. The human way. Darren stood up. "All right. Enough talking. Let's get to work." Zyra raised an eyebrow. "Work?" Torvax grinned. "Training." Zyra's stomach twisted. She had trained her whole life. But Guthrie training was brutal. Harsh. They threw you into the pit and expected you to crawl out stronger. She didn't expect humans to be different. She was wrong. Lesson 1, Survival over Strength. The training deck was a wide, open space with a reinforced floor. Weapons lined the walls, not just guns, but knives, staffs, even old-style swords. Darren grabbed a wooden baton and tossed another to Zyra. She caught it easily. "You're fast," Darren noted. "But that won't save you in a real fight." Zyra smirked. "I was trained by the best." Darren raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? Let's see about that." Then, he attacked. Fast. Precise. No wasted movement. Zyra barely had time to react before his baton cracked against her wrist, knocking her weapon away. She staggered back. Darren didn't let up. He swept his leg, she dodged. She went for a counterattack, he caught her arm, twisted, and sent her to the floor. Zyra gritted her teeth. "You fight dirty." Darren smirked. "No, I fight smart." She growled, picking herself up again. Again. Darren's smile widened. "Now you're getting it." Lesson 2, The Strength of the Weak. They fought for hours. And Zyra began to understand. It wasn't about brute force. It wasn't about size. It was about adaptability. Humans were unpredictable. They used tactics no Guthrie would ever consider. And for the first time, Zyra realized. Maybe strength wasn't just about power. Maybe it was about knowing when to bend, when to strike, when to endure. And maybe, just maybe, she had never been weak at all. The challenge. Zyra wiped sweat from her forehead. Again. Darren tossed her a water bottle. "You don't need to prove anything." She caught it. "Yes, I do." Darren studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, then. Time for the real test." Zyra raised an eyebrow. "What test?" Darren grinned. "A fight." She smirked. "You and me." Darren shook his head. "Not me. Torvax." Zyra's smirk vanished. Torvax, the massive four-armed warrior, stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. He grinned. This will be fun. The fight of her life. The entire crew gathered around, watching as Zyra faced the biggest opponent she had ever fought. Torvax was huge. Twice her height, 4 times her strength. Zyra had no chance. At least, not if she fought like a Gathari. The moment Torvax charged, Zyra moved. Not straight on, that was suicide. She dodged. Weaved. Used speed instead of power. Torvax swung, she ducked. He grabbed, she slipped past. For the first time, she wasn't fighting like a warrior. She was fighting like a human. And then, she saw her opening. Torvax lunged. Zyra sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and used his own momentum against him. The massive warrior crashed to the floor. The room went silent. Torvax blinked up at her. Then, he laughed. Amazing. He roared. You fight like a human. Zyra froze. Then, slowly, she smiled. Maybe, just maybe, that wasn't a bad thing. A new beginning. Darren clapped a hand on her shoulder. Told you. Strength isn't just power. It's knowing how to use what you've got. Zyra exhaled. I think I get it now. Darren grinned. Good. Because you're gonna need it. Zyra frowned. Why? Then, the ship's alarm blared. Sienna's voice came over the speakers. We've got company. Darren's expression darkened. Who? Sienna hesitated. Gathari warship. And they're hailing us. Zyra's blood turned to ice. Her people had found her. And this time, they wouldn't let her go. The return of the Gathari. The alarm blared, casting the ship in a flashing red glow. Zyra stood frozen, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. They found me. Darren moved first, his voice sharp. Everyone to battle stations. The crew sprang into action, grabbing weapons, securing defenses, and preparing for the worst. Zyra turned toward the main screen, where the massive Gathari warship loomed outside the viewport. It was 3 times the size of the starbound horizon, its black and gold hull shimmering under the system's twin suns. A symbol burned on the side, the sigil of the Dominion High Guard. Zyra's stomach twisted. They hadn't just sent a hunting party. They had sent an execution squad. The warning. A hollow voice crackled over the comms. This is Commander Rieger of the Dominion High Guard. The traitor Zyra is aboard your vessel. Surrender her now, or be destroyed. Darren crossed his arms. Well, that's rude. Sienna glanced up from the weapons console. They've got enough firepower to turn us into dust. Zyra's hands curled into fists. They weren't here to negotiate. She knew how the Gathari worked. Once they marked someone as unworthy, that person was erased. This wasn't about bringing her back. It was about making an example out of her. Torvax leaned against the wall, unimpressed. So, we fight? Darren turned to Zyra. His expression was unreadable. It's your call. Zyra blinked. What? Darren's voice was calm. Your people. Your choice. A cold feeling settled in her chest. If she surrendered, the crew would be spared, but she would be executed. If she stayed, they would all die. Zyra exhaled sharply. Then, she made her choice. She stepped forward, her voice steady. We fight. The first strike. Darren grinned. Good answer. Sienna's fingers flew over the controls. Charging weapons. Shields up. The Gathari warship fired first. The blast rocked the ship, sending Zyra stumbling. Sparks flew from the control panels. "We can't take another hit like that," Lauren shouted. Darren smirked. "Then let's not get hit again." The starbound Horizon twisted mid-air, dodging a second barrage with impossible speed. Zyra watched in awe. Guthrie ships didn't dodge like this. They powered through attacks, taking hits with brute strength. But humans? They moved like ghosts. A dangerous offer. Another transmission came through. "Zyra. I know you can hear me." Zyra's breath hitched. She knew that voice. Commander Rieger. One of the strongest warriors in the Dominion. The man who had once told her she was a disgrace. "I will give you one chance. Surrender, and your new friends will be spared. Resist, and they die because of you." Zyra's chest tightened. She looked at Darren. "They'll never stop hunting me." Darren leaned back, casual. "Then we should give them a reason to." Zyra stared. "What?" Darren smirked. "Let's piss them off." He turned to Sienna. "Fire all weapons. The Guthrie learn a lesson." The starbound Horizon opened fire, twin plasma cannons tearing through the Guthrie ship's shields. Rieger had underestimated them. Humans fought dirty. Zyra watched as the Dominion warship struggled to adjust, unable to predict the crew's unpredictable, chaotic tactics. Her people had always called humans weak. They were wrong. The Horizon dove into close combat, slipping between the enemy ship's blind spots, striking where it hurt most. The battle wasn't about brute force. It was about being smarter. And this time, Zyra fought like a human. She took the weapons console, guiding the cannons with speed and precision. Her hands moved instinctively, dodging, striking, adapting. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to prove herself. She was just trying to win. And she did. The Guthrie ship shuddered violently, sparks erupting from its hull. Sienna grinned. "They're retreating." Zyra's breath caught. Her people had never retreated before. But today, they did. Aftermath. As the Guthrie ship vanished into hyperspace, Zyra slumped back in her chair. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt something else. Darren sat beside her. "You okay?" She hesitated. Then, finally, "No." Darren nodded. "Because they'll be back." Zyra clenched her fists. "Because they ran." Darren frowned. "That's a bad thing." Zyra exhaled. "Guthrie don't run. If they did today, it's because they weren't here to kill me." Darren's expression darkened. "Then what were they here for?" Zyra's voice was quiet. "To test me." Silence. Then Sienna cursed. "So next time, they'll come with more ships." Zyra nodded. "They don't see me as weak anymore." She looked up at Darren, her silver eyes sharp. "They see me as a threat." Darren smirked. "Good. Let's make sure they never forget it." Zyra smiled for the first time. Because for the first time in her life, she had one. A place to belong. The starbound Horizon drifted through the quiet void, the tension from Zyra's duel still hanging in the air. She had won. Not just the fight, but her right to exist. For the first time in her life, she had a choice. Her people were no longer hunting her. But the question remained. What now? The crew's celebration. Torvax dropped a massive metal mug on the table. "We drink to victory." Rilo, the tiny engineer, grinned. And to Zyra, the warrior who made an entire empire back down. Sienna, the sniper, smirked. And to the High Warlord, who walked away before she could actually kill him. Zyra rolled her eyes. "That's not what happened." Darren leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Pretty sure it is. Zyra shook her head. She had spent her entire life proving herself. Fighting to be something more. Now. She was sitting among a crew that didn't need her to prove anything. They accepted her as she was. She clenched her fists. It felt strange. Why are you all acting like this is normal? She asked. Torvax blinked. You won. Why wouldn't we celebrate? Zyra hesitated. Because, the fight isn't over. I still don't know where I belong. Darren shrugged. Then why not stay here? The room went silent. Zyra stared at him. Stay. Darren nodded. You're one of us now. That is, unless you want to go back to the Dominion. Zyra's stomach twisted. She thought about the Dominion. The endless trials. The battle pits. The loneliness. Then, she looked around the room. The chaos. The laughter. The family. Her choice had never been clearer. She exhaled, then smirked. Fine. But I want my own bunk. Torvax grinned. Then it is settled. Zyra stays. The crew cheered. For the first time in her life, Zyra wasn't fighting for a place. She had won. The mission. The celebration was cut short when Sienna's comms flashed. She frowned. We've got an incoming distress signal. Darren stood. Who? Sienna tapped the console. Encrypted. But it's coming from deep in Dominion space. Zyra's breath caught. The Dominion never sent distress signals. Darren met her gaze. It's your people. Zyra swallowed hard. It could be a trap. Sienna nodded. Or it could be something worse. Darren looked around the room. What's the call, Zyra? Zyra's hands curled into fists. She wasn't a Gathari warrior anymore. She wasn't a runaway exile. She was Zyra of the starbound horizon. And when people needed help, she answered. She met Darren's gaze. We go. Darren grinned. Knew you'd say that. The starbound horizon jumped into hyperspace. And just like that, a new war had begun. The final stand. The starbound horizon surged through hyperspace, its engines roaring as it raced toward the unknown distress signal. Zyra stood at the viewport, arms crossed, her mind spinning. A distress signal. From deep inside Dominion space. Impossible. Her people did not ask for help. So if someone had sent a message, something was very, very wrong. Darren's voice broke through her thoughts. We drop out in 10 seconds. Everyone ready? The crew checked their weapons, their expressions serious. This wasn't just another mission. This was a trap. It had to be. But Zyra couldn't ignore it. Because if there was even a chance that someone in the Dominion needed help, she had to know. The countdown hit 0. The ship lurched out of hyperspace. And the scene before them stole her breath away. The fall of the Dominion. The Dominion war fleet was in ruins. Hundreds of massive Gathari warships, some of the strongest in the galaxy, were reduced to burning wreckage. Bodies drifted in the void. Fires raged across the remains of battlecruisers. And in the middle of it all, a single Dominion outpost remained intact. Zyra's hands tightened into fists. What happened here? Sienna scanned the area. No signs of enemy ships. Whatever hit them, it's already gone. Torvax rumbled, who could destroy an entire Dominion fleet this fast? Zyra's blood ran cold. She knew only one answer. The silence. The crew fell silent. Darren exhaled. If they're making moves this deep in Dominion space, this war just changed. Zyra's voice was steady. We need to get inside that outpost. Now. Darren nodded. Let's move. The starbound horizon descended. And the crew prepared for war. The truth in the ruins. The air inside the outpost was thick with smoke and death. The halls were dark. Bodies littered the floor, Gathari soldiers, cut down by something fast. Zyra led the way, stepping over fallen warriors she had once called her own. Then, a sound. A whisper. A movement. Sienna raised her rifle. We're not alone. From the shadows, a figure stumbled forward. Zyra's heart stopped. It was a Gathari warrior. Wounded. Barely alive. His armor was scorched, his breathing ragged. But she recognized him instantly. Warlord Kael Varek. Her former enemy. The strongest warrior in the Dominion. And now. The last one left. The enemy's last words. Varek looked up, his red eyes filled with something Zyra had never seen in him before. Fear. Blood-born. He rasped, using the old name for her kind. Zyra knelt beside him. What happened here? Varek coughed, his body shaking. We were betrayed. Darren frowned. By who? Varek's hands clawed at Zyra's arm, desperate. You don't understand, he gasped. The silence, they are not what we thought. They are not hunting just the blood-born. They are hunting all of us. Zyra's breath caught. Varek's voice dropped to a whisper. They are not invaders. They were here first. Silence hung in the air. Zyra felt her heart begin to race. The Silence were not a new enemy. They were the true rulers of the galaxy, before any of them existed. And now. They were taking it back. Varek's body shuddered. His grip on Zyra's arm weakened. His last words barely a whisper. Run. And then. He was gone. The final battle begins. Zyra stood slowly. Her people were not the target. The Dominion was not the target. All of them were. Torvax growled, what do we do? Darren stepped forward. Same thing we always do. Zyra turned to face him. She wasn't the same warrior who had fled the Dominion. She wasn't the same exile who had been cast out. She was something more. Something new. And for the first time, she knew exactly where she belonged. She turned to the crew. We stop running. She gripped her weapon. We stop hiding. Her silver eyes burned. We take the fight to the Silence. The crew grinned. Darren smirked. Now that's a plan I can get behind. The starbound horizon lifted off. And Zyra, the outcast, the warrior, the bloodborn, prepared for war. Because this time, the Silence would learn why humans never fight alone.